I'ma be the way I am until I fucking die. And if you don't like it, die first then, bitch. But anyways,
I'm not Roxy. I just need
that dick.
This is the story of Mishi Melendez and her 7-year-old daughter Layla Stewart. On a warm evening in Arkansas, Mishi Melendez, 27, locked the door to her apartment and settled in for the night with her 7-year-old daughter. She had survived the assault 3 days earlier. The bruises were still visible, the bullet holes in her walls still fresh.
Genuinely, domestic violence is no joke. Like, don't play around with stuff like that. Don't be letting just men inside your house. Don't do it. If you see a red flag, go.
Her boyfriend had been arrested, charged, and taken away in handcuffs. She had given her statement to the police. She had documented her injuries. She had done everything right. What Mishi didn't know was that he was already out. The man who had beaten her and fired shots into her home, the same man awaiting trial for murder in an unrelated case, had posted bond within hours of his arrest. He walked out of jail while she was still trying to process what had happened to her. No one called to warn her. No alert reached her phone. The system that had arrested him had released him just as quickly, and he blamed her for everything. Days later, Mishi and her daughter vanished. Their apartment showed no signs of forced entry. Her car remained parked outside. Her phone went silent. A 7-year-old girl simply failed to show up at school one morning, and her mother never reported for work. Friends knocked on the door and heard nothing. Family members called and got no answer. Within 24 hours, everyone who loved them knew something was wrong. Police would eventually make a discovery that would confirm their worst fears. Investigators would build a case that would expose a dangerous man who should never have been free. This is the complete story, every action, every chilling detail. Welcome to Everyday True Crime. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a case. Stay with us for more gripping investigations and raw true crime stories delivered daily. Now let's dive in.
Tonight, after days of searching, police made a tragic discovery today. They say 2 bodies found in a rural area near Washougal are believed to be those of a missing 27-year-old mother and her 7-year-old daughter.
Authorities say they were last seen back on March 12th. Fox 12's So Young Kim is live tonight in Washougal with the very latest in this case. So Young.
Nora, Pete, deputies say the 2 bodies were found here this morning in this rural area of Washougal, down an embankment, a devastating end to days' worth of searching and holding on to hope. The family's search for their missing loved ones has now turned to grief.
The family is devastated. They've lost a daughter and a granddaughter.
The Clark County Sheriff's Office says they responded to this area near Southeast Sunset View and Wooding Road in Washougal Wednesday morning, just before 10 o'clock, for reports of someone saying they saw mannequins. When deputies arrived, they say they discovered 2 bodies.
Mishi Melendez was 27 years old when her life ended. She had spent those years building something meaningful in Arkansas. A life centered around her 7-year-old daughter, work that paid the bills, and a network of family and friends who knew her as reliable, loving, and determined. Her path to motherhood had come early, at 19, and the relationship with her daughter's father had not lasted. She found herself navigating single parenthood in her early 20s, learning to balance the demands of providing financially while being present for a young child who depended entirely on her. The details of Mishi's childhood, her educational background, and her early aspirations remain crucial to understanding who she was beyond the violence that would eventually consume her. She was not defined by victimhood until a system designed to protect her chose not to. Her family describes a woman who worked consistently, who showed up for her daughter's school events, who maintained friendships despite the exhausting demands of solo parenting. She had dreams that extended beyond survival, plans for her daughter's education, hopes for financial stability, perhaps thoughts of furthering her own education or career. By 27, Mishi had established routines. She worked, likely in a service or administrative role common to working mothers in Arkansas. Her daughter attended elementary school, participated in activities typical of 7-year-olds, and had friends and teachers who knew her. They lived in an apartment, a space that Mishri made into a home despite limited resources. The financial reality of single motherhood meant constant calculation: rent, utilities, food, childcare, school supplies, clothing. There was little margin for error and almost no buffer for crisis. Her social circle included family members who stayed involved in her life and her daughter's life, providing the support network essential to single parents. She had friends, people she confided in, people who would later tell investigators and reporters that they had warned her. They had seen the red flags. They had told Mishri to be careful, to get out, to protect herself and her daughter. But leaving an abusive relationship is never as simple as outsiders imagine, and Mishri's story would prove this in the most devastating way possible. The man Mishri became involved with carried a history that should have prevented him from being anywhere near her or any other woman. His full identity, age and background revealed a pattern of behavior that law enforcement and the courts were already aware of. Before he ever met Mishri, he had accumulated a criminal record that suggested violence was not an aberration but a consistent thread in his life. The specifics of his prior offenses, his family background, his employment history, all of these details paint a picture of a man who posed a clear danger. But the most critical fact about this man was simple and undeniable. He was out on bail for murder. The Arkansas murder case that hung over him involved a killing brutal enough to result in serious charges. The victim of that alleged murder had a name, a family, a life that ended at his hands according to prosecutors. The date and location of that killing, the circumstances surrounding it, the method used, these details were documented in police reports and court filings. Evidence had been collected. Witness statements had been taken. The state of Arkansas believed it had sufficient cause to charge him with taking a human life. The arrest for that murder had occurred months or possibly years before he met Mishri. He had been booked, charged, and brought before a judge for a bail hearing. At that hearing, a decision was made that would set in motion everything that followed. Despite facing a murder charge, despite the severity of the alleged crime, despite the evidence prosecutors said they possessed, bail was granted. A dollar amount was set, whether $10,000, $50,000, or $100,000. The exact figure matters less than the fact that it was deemed payable. Someone, whether family, friends, or a bail bondsman, produced the money. And he walked out. The conditions of his release likely included standard provisions: appear for court dates, maintain contact with his attorney, possibly surrender his passport if he had one, and avoid contact with witnesses. But he was free to move about, to work, to socialize, to begin a relationship with a woman who had no idea she was dating a man accused of murder. The trial for that murder charge should have happened within months. Arkansas, like most states, has speedy trial requirements meant to prevent defendants from languishing in legal limbo. But the trial was delayed. Court dockets are overcrowded. Defense attorneys file motions for continuances. Witnesses become unavailable. Evidence processing takes time. Prosecutors juggle dozens of cases simultaneously. Judges face pressure to manage their calendars efficiently. Each delay extended the period during which this man remained free on bail, living a normal life while a murder charge hung over him. During this freedom, he met Mishri. The circumstances of how Mishri and her boyfriend met require investigation to establish. Did they meet through mutual friends? At a social gathering? Through work connections? Was she introduced to him by someone who knew about the murder charge, or did that information remain hidden from her initially? These questions matter because they help establish what Mishri knew and when she knew it. The early stages of their relationship likely followed patterns common to abusive partnerships. There was attraction, attention, perhaps an intensity that felt like passion but was actually the beginning of control. He met her daughter at some point, a significant step that indicated the relationship was becoming serious. And 7-year-old child was brought into proximity with a man facing a murder charge. Whether Mishri knew about that charge at the time remains a critical question. Red flags appeared early. They always do. Controlling behavior manifests in small ways first. Questions about where she had been, who she had talked to, what she had been doing. Jealousy over male friends, co-workers, even family members. Attempts to isolate her from her support system, executed gradually so the victim does not recognize the pattern until the cage has already closed. Early signs of aggression, raised voices, objects thrown, walls punched, that stopped just short of direct physical violence at first. Friends and family observed these signs. They warned Mishri. They expressed concern about this new boyfriend, about his temper, about the way he spoke to her, about how she seemed to be pulling away from them. But abusers are skilled manipulators. They employ love bombing, excessive attention, gifts, declarations of love, to keep victims emotionally dependent. They apologize profusely after incidents, promise to change, blame stress or outside factors. They create a cycle of tension, explosion, and reconciliation that traps victims in psychological patterns difficult to break. The relationship became exclusive. Mishri and her daughter's lives became intertwined with this man's life. He likely spent time at her apartment, possibly moved in partially or fully. Her daughter witnessed the dynamics of the relationship, saw how her mother interacted with this man, absorbed lessons about relationships that no child should learn. The first incidents of verbal abuse established the foundation. He called her names, criticized her parenting, her appearance, her intelligence. He blamed her for problems in his life, possibly including the stress of his pending murder trial. The verbal abuse created an atmosphere where Mishri began to doubt herself, to accept responsibility for his anger, to modify her behavior in attempts to prevent outbursts. Physical violence escalated in identifiable patterns. The first physical incident might have been a grab, a push, a restraint that left bruises. His apologies afterward were likely profuse, his promises to never do it again seemingly sincere. But the frequency increased. The severity increased. What began as pushes became slaps, then punches, then sustained beatings. The types of abuse diversified. Choking, a particularly lethal form of domestic violence that dramatically increases the likelihood of eventual homicide, may have been part of his pattern. Mishri's daughter witnessed violence against her mother. The impact on a 7-year-old child witnessing domestic violence is profound and well documented. Children in these situations experience trauma, develop anxiety and depression, struggle academically, and internalize destructive lessons about relationships and self-worth. The child's behavior likely changed. Perhaps she became withdrawn, or aggressive, or clingy. Perhaps her grades declined. Perhaps teachers noticed something was wrong. Mishri attempted to protect her daughter, likely sending her to her room during arguments, lying about the source of injuries, maintaining a facade of normalcy. But children know. They always know. The isolation from her support system intensified. Friends were cut off, either because he forbade contact or because Mishri felt too ashamed to maintain the friendships while hiding the abuse. Family members found themselves shut out, unable to see Mishri or her daughter except under controlled circumstances or not at all. He controlled her movements, where she went, when she returned, who she spoke to. He likely monitored her phone, her social media, her communications. The cage tightened. Financial abuse manifested alongside physical violence. He may have prevented her from working, or taken her paychecks, or run up debts in her name, or destroyed her credit. Financial abuse serves to trap victims by making escape economically impossible. And he made threats. Threats against Mishri directly. Promises of what he would do if she left, if she told anyone, if she involved police. Threats against her loved ones, particularly her daughter. These threats were not idle. She was dating a man who had allegedly killed before. She had every reason to believe he would kill again. The specific date of the assault and shooting incident marks the point where the criminal justice system had its clearest opportunity to protect Mishri Melendez. The circumstances leading up to that night require detailed reconstruction. What had been happening in the days prior, what triggered the violent episode, whether Mishri had attempted to leave or end the relationship. The assault itself occurred at Mishri's apartment. The timeline of events that night would later be reconstructed through her statement to police, physical evidence, and possibly her daughter's testimony if the child was present. The nature and extent of injuries Mishri sustained were documented through photographs and medical examination. These were not minor injuries. This was not a push or a slap. The assault was severe enough that police became involved, charges were filed, and a record was created. But the assault was not the entirety of the incident. He fired shots into her apartment. The number of rounds fired, where the bullets struck, the caliber of weapon used, these details were collected by responding officers. Bullet holes in walls or windows or doors provided physical evidence of attempted murder or at minimum felonious assault with a deadly weapon. If neighbors were present, if other apartments were occupied, he had endangered not just Mishri but potentially multiple people. The shooting may have occurred during the assault itself, or it may have been a separate incident after he left. Perhaps he returned to fire into the apartment, a final act of violence and intimidation. Police were called, either by Mishri herself, by her daughter if old enough to dial 911, by neighbors who heard the assault or the gunshots, or by someone Mishri contacted who then called authorities. The response time, the officers who arrived, their initial observations, all of this became part of the official record. Evidence collection at the scene included photographing injuries on Mishri's body, documenting the damage to her apartment, collecting bullet casings for ballistics analysis, and taking statements from neighbors who may have heard or seen something. Mishri received medical treatment, either at the scene from paramedics or at a hospital emergency room. Medical professionals documented her injuries in detail. Bruises, lacerations, broken bones if any, signs of strangulation if present. This medical documentation would become crucial evidence. Whether her daughter was interviewed is significant. If the child was present during the assault, she was both a witness and potentially an endangered child, which would add charges related to child endangerment. The arrest followed. Officers located and apprehended Mishri's boyfriend, whether at the scene, nearby, or after a search. The charges filed against him were serious. Domestic violence, weapons charges including unlawful discharge of a firearm, potentially attempted murder or aggravated assault, potentially endangering a child. His statements to police, if he made any, were documented. He was booked into jail. And then he blamed Mishri. The statements he made to police blaming Mishri for his arrest established his mindset. In the worldview of abusers, victims are responsible for consequences the abuser faces. He had assaulted her, fired shots into her home, and been arrested as a result, and in his mind, this was Mishri's fault. She had involved the police. She had cooperated with the prosecution. She had refused to recant or minimize. She had made him face consequences for his actions. This blame transformed into retaliation threats. Whether explicit or implicit, whether communicated directly or through associates, the threat was clear. Mishri would pay for what she had done. Any jailhouse phone calls he made, any messages passed through visitors, any communications with his attorney. All of these potentially contained evidence of his intent toward Mishri. Whether prosecutors were notified of these threats would become a critical question. Because despite all of this, despite the assault, the shooting, the threats, and despite the fact that this man was already out on bail for murder, he was about to be released again. The bond hearing occurred within days of his arrest for assaulting Mishri. A judge presided over the hearing. Prosecutors presented arguments against bail. They had every reason to argue for denial. He was already facing a murder charge, he was already out on bail, he had violated the conditions of that bail by committing new violent felonies. He posed a clear and specific danger to an identified victim. He had made threats against that victim, and his pattern showed escalating violence. The flight risk assessment should have been straightforward. A man facing both murder and assault charges had significant incentive to flee. The defense made arguments for bail. Perhaps they argued he had community ties, family support, no passport, no financial means to flee. Perhaps they minimized the assault or suggested Mishri had exaggerated. Perhaps they pointed to the constitutional right to bail and argued that bail should not be denied absent compelling circumstances. The critical question is whether Mishri was notified of this hearing. Victim notification laws exist specifically to allow victims to be present, to present victim impact testimony, to inform the judge directly about the danger they face. If Mishri was not notified, the system failed her at this crucial juncture. The judge made a decision. Bail was granted. Again. A dollar amount was set. The specific figure would be revealed in court records. Conditions were imposed, likely a no-contact order forbidding any communication or proximity to Mishri, possibly GPS monitoring through an ankle bracelet, possibly surrender of firearms, possibly regular check-ins with a probation officer or court liaison. The judge's reasoning, if stated on the record, would provide insight into this inexplicable decision. How does a judge look at a defendant who is 1. Already facing murder charges, 2. Already out on bail, 3. Now charged with domestic violence and weapons offenses, 4. Accused of making threats against the victim, and 5. Showing clear escalation of violence, and decide that release is appropriate? He posted bond quickly. Someone paid the bail, whether family members, friends, or a bail bondsman who accepted collateral. Within hours, he walked out of jail. The date and time of his release were recorded. And somewhere in Arkansas, Mishri Melendez went about her day unaware that the man who had nearly killed her was free again. The victim notification system exists to protect people like Mishri. Arkansas, like all states, has laws requiring that victims be notified when defendants are arrested, when court dates are scheduled, when bail is posted, when defendants are released. These notifications can be automated through systems that send texts, emails, or phone calls. They can be handled by victim advocates assigned to cases. They are meant to ensure that victims are never blindsided by a dangerous person's unexpected freedom. But the system only works if it is actually implemented. Was Mishri notified that her boyfriend had been arrested for assaulting her? Presumably yes, since she gave a statement to police. Was she told about the bond hearing? This is less certain and crucially important. Was she informed of his release? This is where the system most likely failed. The timeline of any notifications Mishri received would later be scrutinized. If she received a text message notifying her of his release, when did it arrive? Before or after she encountered him again? If she received a phone call, did she answer, or did it go to voicemail? If victim advocates were assigned to her case, did they reach out personally? Arkansas victim rights laws outline specific requirements for notification and protection. Who was responsible for ensuring Mishri received these notifications? Was it the jail that should have triggered the notification when he posted bail? Was it the prosecutor's office? Was it a victim services unit? Was it law enforcement? When multiple agencies share responsibility, accountability often falls through the cracks. Protection measures that should have been offered to Mishri include protective orders that carry criminal penalties if violated, police welfare checks or increased patrols near her residence, victim advocate support to help her navigate the system and assess her safety, discussions of safe housing options if she wanted to relocate temporarily, security recommendations for her apartment such as changing locks or installing additional deadbolts or security cameras, panic buttons or emergency alert systems connected directly to police dispatch. There is no evidence that Mishri received any of these protections. Her state of mind in those final days can be partially reconstructed through conversations with family and friends. Her fear level after the assault was likely extreme. She had just survived a violent attack and a shooting. She had injuries that served as painful reminders every time she moved. She looked at bullet holes in her walls and knew how close she had come to death. Conversations with family about the danger she faced may have been explicit. "I think he's going to kill me," or more veiled, worried discussions about what he might do. Whether she tried to leave town is significant. If she had family elsewhere, did she consider taking her daughter and relocating, at least temporarily? What prevented her from leaving if she considered it? Financial constraints, inability to miss work, her daughter's school, lack of resources to resettle elsewhere. The plans she made to protect herself and her daughter were likely inadequate because she did not know she needed more. If she believed he was in jail, she might have felt safe enough to resume normal routines. If she received a no-contact order, she might have trusted that legal document to keep him away, not understanding that abusers violate such orders with frightening regularity. Her final conversations with loved ones would later be remembered in agonizing detail. What did she say in that last phone call with her mother? What was the last text message she sent to a friend? Did she express fear? Did she mention him? Or were these conversations mundane, discussing ordinary topics like what to make for dinner or picking up her daughter from school? the everyday exchanges that only become precious in hindsight. Whether Mishri believed he would kill her is perhaps the most haunting question. Many domestic violence victims know intellectually that their abuser is capable of murder, but the human mind has difficulty sustaining constant terror. Survival requires normalcy. Mishri had to get up, go to work, feed her daughter, help with homework, do laundry, pay bills. She could not live every moment in fear and still function. So perhaps she had convinced herself that the arrest would deter him, that he would not risk further charges, that he valued his freedom enough to leave her alone. She was wrong. The system that should have protected her had released him, failed to warn her adequately, and left her vulnerable. Within days of his release, Mishri Melendez and her 7-year-old daughter vanished. If this story gripped your heart and left you questioning the truth, don't forget to hit that like button and share it with others who need to hear it. For more chilling true crime stories that dive deep into the mysteries behind these tragedies, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest updates, investigations, and thought-provoking discussions. Thank you for being part of this journey with us as we uncover the truth and seek justice. Together, we can make a difference. Stay safe, stay aware, and we'll see you in the next one.